Hello and welcome. I'm Ashley and this is Beauty Biography. Every Friday, we explore the life of one iconic beauty while creating an inspired makeup look. It allows me to combine my love of A&E, like 90s era biographies, with my love of buying way too much makeup, which is a lot of fun for me. Now, if it sounds like fun to you too, then be sure to give this video a thumbs up and also hit the subscribe button. That way, every week when I publish a new beauty biography, you will see it pop up in your YouTube subscription feed. We also have a monthly giveaway here on the channel. This month's prize is a $250 Nordstrom gift card. Details on how to enter are in the description box below. Today, we are exploring the life of the Hollywood legend Bette Davis. Yes, Bette Davis of Bette Davis eyes. Bette was intense and raw and just a dominating force. So many of the things that Hollywood and society in general really would prefer women not to be. And in this regard, Bette blazed a trail in Hollywood that has left a lasting mark. So without further ado, let us begin. Bette Davis was born as Ruth Elizabeth Davis on April 5th, 1908 in Lowell, Massachusetts. Lowell is a suburb of Boston. Now, her birthday is April 5th, which means Bette Davis is our very first Aries here on Beauty Biography. Bette is a textbook Aries. Aries are often considered confident, courageous, determined, but they can sometimes also be taken to be kind of difficult. And really, it's just that they have very high standards for themselves. They're very determined to reach the goals they set, and they expect that from others as well. Bette's parents are lawyer Harlow Davis and homemaker Ruth Davis. She also has one younger sister named Barbara. And when Bette is 7 years old, her parents divorce. It's often said that Bette's father did not really like children. He never really wanted children. He didn't get along very well with children. And Bette was a very strong-willed child, and he just found this very difficult to cope with, I suppose. There's a very good lesson though here, because I know that society then and still today places a lot of pressure on people to, get married and have children. But if you even have like an inkling that you don't want children, don't have children, because they're just as difficult as people say they are. Like, it's just as difficult to be a parent as people say it is. So it's like, it is best for everyone if you don't have children, if you don't want children. Like, don't let anyone tell you differently. You're allowed to not want children, and it's for the best that you don't have them if you don't want them. So Bette's father leaves, and from this point on, Bette says that her mother and her sister refer to themselves as the Three Musketeers. So they were going to make it with or without their father, and they did. Bette's mother, Ruth, began doing photography, and she didn't make a ton of money doing that, but she worked really hard. She threw herself into it, and she was able to send both of her daughters to private schools. She was able to make sure that they were provided for and had the same life that they would have had even if their father would have stayed. So her mother really worked hard to make sure that those girls were taken care of. She also gave Bette all the affection that Bette did not get from her father. Ruth, Bette's mother, made sure that Bette felt like she was the center of the universe. She was super supportive, always talking her up. I mean, she just made it very clear to Bette that Bette was the center of everything. So it's interesting because we're going to see the dichotomy between having an absent father and a very almost smothering mother play out in Bette's life, because Bette has a lot of ups and downs. She kind of fluctuates between feeling a little bit insecure about herself and really wanting to prove herself because of that insecurity, and then also feeling like she should be the center of the world and everyone should be doing what she wants and supporting her goals. Bette never does reconcile with her father, so I'm not going to mention him again. And I just want to say that the lesson there, in my opinion, is that you do not owe it to anyone who abandons you to make nice with them. As long as you make peace with yourself, you're golden. During high school, Bette is very involved in theater in her school, And after seeing the play The Wild Duck, she sees Peg Entwistle's performance in that play, and she decides she wants to be an actress. So after high school, Betty's mom takes her to New York City, where Betty goes to a drama school. She briefly attends this drama school in New York, and then after that, she begins to appear in plays across the Northeast before making her Broadway debut in Broken Dishes in 1929. Right around the same time that Betty makes her Broadway debut, films in Hollywood are transitioning from silent film to what they called talkies, which just means whereas films were silent, now they're able to have dialogue and sound, and you can hear people. What this means is that a lot of the actors and actresses that were really good in silent films, they were really good at conveying the emotions in their faces. They don't all necessarily sound great now that they do have the option of sound. So a lot of Hollywood producers and agents and studios start coming to Broadway to look for actors and actresses that sound good. Because obviously to be on Broadway, you need to have a good voice. You need to be able to project. You need to sound nice. This is how Betty is discovered. She's discovered by a Universal agent who is on Broadway looking for talent, and he finds Betty, and she has a fantastic voice. So they bring Betty out to Hollywood and they sign her to a short contract with Universal. Unfortunately, things get off to a very slow start for Betty. They put her in a few screen tests, and she has a lot of difficulty because they're basically doing these screen tests where she has to do like love scenes with men, and she's very waspy, she's very virginal, and she's just completely freaked out by the whole idea of like this stranger kissing her on camera. And so she doesn't really, they just can't find where to put her, and they think, well, maybe we should just cancel her contract because we have no idea what to do with her. Betty gets her first of several breaks that are going to help her actually stay in Hollywood rather than leaving. And the first one is that Carl Freund, a cinematographer, is about to film a movie called Bad Sisters. And he sees Betty and thinks, no, she's got lovely eyes. Let her be in my film, Bad Sisters. And this film in 1931 is actually Betty's film debut. It's not super successful. It's pretty forgettable, but she's got her first film credit. Pretty Forgettable basically sums up the first year and a half of Betty's career. She's not getting really good films. They're very forgettable films, very forgettable roles. There's just nothing very standout. And Betty, she wants to be an actress. She takes her craft very seriously, and so she decides, you know what, I'm just gonna move back to Broadway. I'm leaving Hollywood, forget this. But here's the second lucky break. Before Betty can pack up and call it quits, she gets a phone call from a man claiming to be George Arliss. Now, George Arliss, very successful playwright, actor, filmmaker. He was a big deal. So exciting to get a call from him, right? Right, except that Betty doesn't believe it's George Arliss. So she's basically like joking around with this guy, and she's like, oh darling George, haha, so lovely of you to call, like rolling her eyes, just like, okay, you are not George Arliss who is playing a joke on me. But it is George Arliss. He wants Betty to come down to Warner Brothers and interview for a film that he is about to star in that he thinks she's going to be perfect for. And so luckily, eventually, Betty, who, even though she's very embarrassed, is still quite excited, figures out that, okay, this is George Arliss, and yes, I'm going to go down to Warner Brothers and interview for this film. Warner Brothers signs Betty to a contract, and her first film with them is opposite George Arliss in The Man Who Played God in 1932. The film is a minor success, but it's actually a huge point in Betty's career because, she was ready to leave Hollywood altogether, and this is the film that makes her stay. And throughout her life, Betty will attribute her success to George Arliss because she was packing her bags. Like, she was ready to go when he called. This film is Betty's big break, and her contract that she signs with Warner Brothers is for 5 years. And by the time all is said and done between Betty and Warner Brothers, she will actually be there for 18 years. So this is a really huge, important chunk of her career. Although the working relationship with Warner Brothers is going to last for 18 years, it is not without ups and downs. We have seen these contracts in a lot of the beauty biography videos that I've done so far. And what we've seen is this thing called the star system. And I just want to briefly explain kind of some of the things that suck about the star system so you understand why so many of these actresses were quite unhappy even though they were making a good bit of money. So these contracts were very predatory, and they basically determined that, like, you know what, you belong to the studio now. You, Bette Davis, you make the films we tell you to. If we say make 5 films a year, you make 5 films a year. If we say you don't make any films this year, you don't make any. You don't have any control over the roles that you're gonna play. You don't have any control over what you do on your days off. These are just very lopsided contracts. And even though she's making good money, who really wants to be told what to do by their boss all the time? Like, it's a lot. Betty's contract begins and she starts making several films a year. Her work schedule is very intense. She makes about 15 films between 1933 and 1935. So in the span of 3 years, she makes 15 films. She does, though, however, have time to start a relationship back up with her high school sweetheart, Harmon Nelson, and they marry in 1932. This will be her first husband. While Betty is making a lot of films, she's really unhappy with the roles she's getting. They're quite forgettable films, and the roles are just not challenging to her. And she wants meaty, challenging roles that she feels represent real women and real struggle and real life. She doesn't want to be playing these cookie cutter parts, and that's what she's been giving. And again, they tell her what roles to play, so she's not getting a whole lot of say in this, and that's very frustrating for her. This changes a bit in 1934 with the film of Human Bondage. Now, because the leading female role in this movie is a quite unsympathetic femme fatale, the producers of this movie have a very hard time finding an actress who wants to take the role. Most actresses look at the script and they're like, yeah, I don't want to do this. This will ruin my career. But not Bette Davis. Betty looks at the film script and she's like, oh my gosh, this is an amazing role. I have to play this role. Great, right? Betty's finally found a role she loves. Only problem is the film is not being made by Warner Brothers, and Betty is basically owned by Warner Brothers. So Betty needs Warner Brothers' permission to make the film. So she goes to the head of Warner Brothers, Jack Warner, and he's like, yeah, no, you're not making this film. This role, like, will ruin your career because people will think that you're a terrible, unsympathetic femme fatale. And Betty, though, she's an Aries. She's like, yeah, listen, you're not going to tell me what to do. I'm going to bug the ever-loving crap out of you until you let me make this film. So for days, she goes to Jack Warner's office and she is sitting there at 7 a.m. When he arrives for work, she's already sitting there for days. And she's like, listen, I'm going to keep showing up every daggum day until you let me be in this film. And finally, Jack Warner is like, you know what? This is getting really annoying. Just make the film, sure. But Betty knew best because the film of Human Bondage is the film that makes Bette Davis a star. The role is revolutionary for its time. Betty, again, plays a very unsympathetic, kind of almost evil at times woman. And not only that, but she's extremely realistic in her performance. There's actually, at the end of the movie, a scene where Betty is succumbing to tuberculosis, and she's very realistic about this. She insists upon designing her own makeup because she says, you know what, I was not going to be dying of tuberculosis and look like, oh, I just forgot to take a nap. Like, this is a very, like, horrific looking disease. It takes the toll on the face. You look quite awful. And she was very committed to that. So, I mean, she is one of the first women who actually portrays what disease really looks like on film. Fun fact, her character actually was supposed to die of syphilis, not tuberculosis, but Hollywood's censorship rules at the time would not allow that. So they had to change it from syphilis to tuberculosis. Betty's performance, critically acclaimed. I mean, it is groundbreaking, and people in Hollywood are actually livid when Betty is not nominated for an Academy Award. However, at the time, you were allowed to write people in for Academy Awards. So there is a pretty big write-in campaign to get Betty her Oscar, but it is ultimately unsuccessful. She comes in third, so she does not win the Oscar, but Bette Davis she's a big deal in Hollywood now. She doesn't miss a beat. She goes back to work. Her family actually describes her as being a little bit of a workaholic, and she goes again to the pace of making like 5 to 7 movies a year. In 1935, Bette gets the leading role in the movie Dangerous. The film and her performance are again critically acclaimed, and this time Bette is not snubbed. She is nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress, and she wins. She actually becomes the first Warner Brothers actress to win an Academy Award. So Warner Brothers needs to give Bette her due. So the theme of Bette being unhappy with her roles is about to come up again. Bette wants really good, meaty roles. She does not want these like soapy Lifetime movie roles. And she's quite angry when she feels like she's going back to that, when she feels like Warner Brothers is once again putting her in these just junk roles. She literally calls them junk. I watched an interview where she's like, junk movies, junk directors, junk. Like she was a firecracker. So at this time, Bette is really bringing in a lot of people to the theater. Her films are very successful box office hits. She's a very hard worker, and she thinks that she deserves her due from Warner Brothers and that they need to take her creative wishes more seriously. So Bette feels they're not, and she decides, you know what, I'm moving to the United Kingdom. She moves to the United Kingdom and she makes this big announcement. I am done with American films. I'm going to make British films. I will show you all. But she still has a contract with Warner Brothers, and they do not want to let her go. So they take Bette to court, and ultimately Bette does lose in court. They're like, you know what? It's a bad contract, but you signed it, so you gotta honor it. So yeah, a loss, but her suing actually does get her the respect of Jack Warner. So there's a victory here. So much so that Jack Warner and Warner Brothers go out and buy her the film Jezebel. This film comes out in 1938, and Bette plays a spoiled Southern belle. While making the movie, she does have an affair with the director. His name is William Wyler. She will later describe him as the love of her life. Bette's performance is critically acclaimed, and because of this, a lot of people think she is a favorite to star as Scarlett O'Hara in the upcoming film Gone with the Wind. However, the producers are like, no, this is not a role for Bette Davis, and the role ultimately goes to Vivien Leigh. No. Despite losing the role that she really wanted, Scarlett O'Hara, the film Jezebel actually marks the most successful period of Bette's career. She's nominated for another Academy Award, and she wins it, and she will go on to be nominated for Best Academy Award Actress for the next 5 years in a row. While her career is beginning to thrive, her personal life, not so much. Things are not going great with her husband, Harmon. He is not enjoying the same kind of success in his career that Bette is. And kind of the boiling point here is that, one, he wants children, and Bette says, you know, I can't have children right now. My career will just fall apart. And she's not wrong. Society even now is not really great at supporting working mothers. So imagine how bad they were at it in the 30s. And the second last straw, or I guess the very last straw, is that Harmon actually finds proof that Bette is having an affair with millionaire, famous aviator Howard Hughes. So yeah, they get a divorce. While Bette's acting is receiving a lot of accolades at this time, she has also developed a little bit of a reputation for being difficult. Now, Bette herself thinks that this was in large part because she was a woman. There's actually an amazing quote from her. I watched an interview where she says, "Every now and then, I would run into a director who was very conscious of the fact that I was a woman and that he must not give me my way or let me play the part the way I wanted to. But that never discouraged me, and in the end, we ended up playing the role the way I wanted to." One thing I think that stands out about the whole was Betty Davis difficult thing or was it just misogyny is that no one disputes that Betty was always on time to set. She always showed up. She always knew her lines. She always was very intent on giving the best performance, and she always treated the crew very well. So while she may have been very outspoken and confident, I think the fact that no one disputes her professionalism leads me at least to believe that really the issue with her being difficult was more so because she was a woman who stood up for herself and her professional opinion in a time where society did not deem that appropriate. Betty Davis, dadgum feminist icon. In 1940, Betty marries Arthur Farnsworth, who she meets while she's vacationing in New England. Funny enough, he's actually described as being a sort of male escort for single women who are on vacation at the inn he works at. So, go Betty. Unfortunately, Arthur and Betty are only married for 3 years because Arthur has an accident in 1943 and dies of a head injury. In 1941, Betty becomes the first president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Scientists. She does not last long in this role, but it's still a really fantastic achievement. And then during the first half of the 1940s, during the war effort, Betty is starring in very successful films, and she is doing her part to support the war effort at home in the United States. She sells war bonds quite successfully. In fact, there's one time where she sells $2 million worth of war bonds in 2 days. Betty also teams up with Cary Grant to transform an old nightclub into the Hollywood Canteen. This was a club that offered food, drinks, and entertainment to American and Allied servicemen who were passing through Los Angeles on their way overseas. Betty would personally make sure that there were big name celebrities there every single night. That way, if you were a serviceman passing through, you knew that you were going to get to see a couple big names. Like she was very dedicated to this, and she did a fantastic job with it. There were stars like Rita Hayworth, Marlene Dietrich, Jane Russell, Ginger Rogers, Doris Day. If you were a star in Hollywood during that time, you were doing shifts at the Hollywood Canteen. Following the war in 1945, Betty marries her third husband, artist William Grant Sherry, and this post-war period is going to see a bit of a decline in Betty's career. The same year that she gets married to William, she also turns down the leading role in the movie Mildred Pierce. That role goes to Joan Crawford, who then goes on to win an Academy Award for that role. Now, when Betty returns from her maternity leave, she finds that once again, it's that same old story of she's not getting the roles that she feels she should be. She is not getting very good directors. She's not getting very promising films. And this really frustrates Betty quite a lot. Betty has been with Warner Brothers for 18 years, and she still has 10 years left on her contract. And she's like, oh my gosh, I cannot do 10 more years of this crap. So she devises a plan, and in 1949, while she is filming the movie Beyond the Forest, she waits until there's only like 2 days left in filming. And in the middle of the night, she says it's 3 a.m. She gets Jack Warner on the phone and she says, listen, if you want me to finish filming these last 2 days of scenes and you want this movie made, you're going to give me my release because I cannot do this anymore. I'm sure that after 18 years of fighting, Jack Warner is just as done with it as Betty is. And so Jack Warner says, all right, you get your release. You can go your own way. Betty gets her release from Warner Brothers, and the next year in 1960, she is cast as Margot Channing in the film All About Eve. This film is actually the film that Betty is probably best known for today. But originally, that role actually wasn't going to go to Betty. They had cast Claudette Colbert in that role, but unfortunately, or fortunately for Betty, I guess, Claudette has an accident and she's unable to film. So they have to replace her, and they end up replacing her with Betty. All About Eve is a huge success. It receives an at the time record of 14 Academy Award nominations, and to this day, it is still the only film in history to receive 4 female acting Academy Award nominations. AFI will later go on to rank All About Eve as number 16 on their 1998 Best 100 American Films list. Soon after filming All About Eve, Betty and her husband, William Grant Sherry, divorce. And one day after her divorce is finalized, Betty marries her All About Eve co-star, Gary Merrill. Gary legally adopts Betty's daughter, BD, or Barbara, and they want to grow their family even further, but after Betty gave birth to BD, doctors told her it would be dangerous for her to give birth again or to go through pregnancy again. So Gary and Betty decide to adopt. They adopt a little girl named Margot, a baby girl named Margot, and a baby boy named Michael. It's really sad actually when baby Margot is about 3 years old. They actually discover that she has a lot of developmental disabilities because of a brain injury that she most likely got during childbirth or shortly thereafter before she was adopted. And because of this, she has to be institutionalized for the rest of her life. Now, this causes a lot of strain, quite understandably, in the marriage between Betty and Gary. Like, this is just really devastating. And Betty's career also kind of languishes during the 1950s. So this is a very difficult period in Betty's life. So the 1950s, really rough for Betty. But things start to look up in the 1960s. And in 1962, Betty stars in the film Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane is a critical and box office success. It also becomes a cult classic, and it kicks off a subgenre of horror known as psycho-biddy films. Psycho-biddy films tend to be psychological thrillers in which there is like a formerly glamorous older woman who becomes like very mentally unbalanced and starts to terrorize the people around her. So this film kicks off psycho-biddy subgenre. Betty receives an Academy Award nomination for this film, and a lot of people think she should have won it. I don't know. I haven't seen all the other actresses that were nominated that year, their films, but that film is like, I mean, it's, if you want a psychological thriller that's going to make you really uncomfortable, that's a good film to watch. Now, for the rest of the 1960s, Betty works quite steadily. She makes several more of these psycho-biddy films. And then in the 1970s, Betty begins to frequently star in television films, and she actually wins an Emmy for one of those television films, Strangers. In 1977, Betty is the first woman to receive the American Film Institute's Lifetime Achievement Award. Betty, I mean, she is a trailblazer. Oh my gosh, what a trailblazer. And now we get to 1981, which is where Betty and my life converge, except not really because I'm not yet born, but it kicks it off. So in 1981, Kim Carnes releases what will become the #1 most played song of the year 1981, Betty Davis Eyes. Oh my God, so good. Over 20 years later, Betty Davis Eyes will become the unofficial theme song of my church youth group, and that will be how I come to know Betty Davis. And actually, that's how a lot of people came to know Betty Davis. This song is credited with introducing a whole new generation to Betty Davis. She actually thanked Kim Carnes for making her look cool to her grandson. This is a big thing for Betty, and it really immortalizes her. I know it sounds silly because it's like, I mean, well, I love the song Betty Davis Eyes, but you know, it might sound a little bit silly, like, oh, she's so accomplished. What would a song do? But when you think about it, that song is super popular, and it's the first time I ever heard of Betty Davis. And honestly, when you think of Betty Davis, I think for most of us, at least younger folks around my age, I say younger, like, you know, I'm 30. I think for a lot of people around my age group, when you hear Betty Davis, that's the first thing you think of is Betty Davis Eyes. So this song really cements Betty's status as a cultural icon. Betty knows that, and she's very grateful for it. She actually is gifted a gold record of Betty Davis Eyes from Kim Carnes, and it is said that she kept that on her wall for the rest of her life. Now, in 1983, Betty is diagnosed with cancer and she has to undergo a mastectomy. Following surgery, she suffers a series of strokes that cause paralysis on one side of her face. Many people think that this is going to be the end of Betty's career. She's just going to retire. But Betty, this is what she had done her whole life, and she was really not ready to let it go. So Betty actually continues to work. In 1985, Betty is devastated when her daughter, BD, Barbara, writes a book that is very, very critical of Betty. It paints her as like this just overbearing alcoholic monster, and it really takes Betty by surprise and hurts her because Betty, I think, thought that she was always very supportive of her daughter, and there's a lot of evidence to that. Betty's daughter actually wanted to get married when she was very young, when she was a teenager, to a man who was about 10 years older, and Betty actually supported this. She paid for the wedding. She put on a beautiful wedding for her daughter. She really supported her, and I think Betty felt that she was very supportive. Her daughter didn't see things the same way. To make it more confounding, I actually watched a 60 Minutes interview that was at the time that this book came out. It was rebroadcast to be like, hey, what's this? Because the interview was Betty's daughter, Barbara, speaking very highly of her mother, which again, you can think highly of your parent and think they were an overbearing alcoholic, but maybe, you know, writing a book where that's all you talk about is like how bad they were. That's a little bit upsetting for the parent. So Betty does not recover emotionally from this blow. She ends up disinheriting her daughter, Barbara. And Barbara's ex-husband, Gary Merrill, who, as we recall, had adopted BD, and Betty's adopted son, Michael, they both dispute Barbara's just damning claims about Betty, and they end contact with BD, saying that BD was motivated to write the book by greed and just that a lot of the things were not true. There are actually several instances in the book where Barbara describes events where she says that Betty was like just sloppy drunk and embarrassing and making everyone around her uncomfortable. And I do believe that that was probably her perspective, but there are also a lot of people who were at these same events that say, no, she didn't seem sloppy drunk. She wasn't making us uncomfortable. We were all just hanging out and having a laugh. Like, everyone has differing perspectives, but this is just a blow that this family never recovers from, and no one ever makes nice with Barbara, who is actually now BD Barbara. She is now a born-again Christian pastor of her own ministry in Virginia. So I will let you take that information and do with it what you will. She is an evangelist. Nothing wrong with evangelists. Something wrong about writing a meme book about your mom, though. In 1986, Betty films her last film, The Whales of August. She stars opposite her friend Ann Southern, and filming takes place in Maine, which Betty loves because she always was a New Englander at heart. She would refer to herself as a Yankee lady. She loved New England. That was where she was from, and that was so intrinsic in her personality. In 1989, Betty collapses at an awards ceremony, and she soon after discovers that her cancer has returned. She does recover well enough to attend a film festival in Spain where she is being honored, but while at the film festival, she becomes weakened and she is too weak to make it back to the US. Betty is taken to a hospital in France where she passes away on October 6th, 1989 at the age of 81 years old. I tried to end every beauty biography by summarizing the legacy of, whoever we're covering in that episode. And there's a lot to summarize with Betty because she truly, truly was a legend. She was the first person to receive 10 Academy Award nominations for acting. She's the first person to receive 5 consecutive Academy Award nominations for acting. She appears in over 100 films, and many of her roles are groundbreaking simply because of the way she was portraying a woman on screen that was new and raw and something that had not been seen before. But perhaps Betty's legacy is best summarized by Graham Greene, who once said, Even the most inconsiderable film seemed temporarily better than they were because of that precise, nervy voice, the pale ash blonde hair, the popping neurotic eyes, a kind of corrupt and phosphorescent prettiness. I would rather watch Miss Davis than any number of competent pictures. Which, dang, that's one hell of a compliment. Because the thing is, Betty was put in a lot of, mediocre films that she didn't want to be in. It was a big sticking point throughout her career. But Betty Davis never gave a mediocre performance. You can't say she did, because she didn't. She elevated everything that she lent her talents to. And more than that, Betty Davis forged a path that made it, even if only slightly, easier for the strong-willed women that would come after her. I thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me today. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of Beauty Biography. Let me know in the comments below, do you have any Betty Davis fun facts? I would love to hear them. Also, if you have any requests for who we should feature next here on Beauty Biography, leave it down below. I hope to see you in my next video. Until then, if you know what that is, we can be friends. Take care of yourself. Bye. She got Greta Garbo standoff size. She's got Betty Davis.